Just another few months, Fred, and then you can die peacefully. I promise. I pulled into the familiar parking lot and got out of the shuddering vehicle. I'd been working at the river's edge for several weeks, and my life had settled into a comfortable routine. I was getting better and better at tending the bar and memorizing more of the few drink recipes that were occasionally requested. The tips were great, and enough for me to save up some money. That thing's a death trap, darlin'. Should have been put out of its misery a year ago. I jumped at the loud, gravelly voice and saw Mackie shuffling across the narrow parking area. Mackie was one of the bar's regulars, although he was not a part of the MC. I had met him the second night I'd worked at the bar. He always came in for a few hours in the evening and sat in the same seat at the bar. He was an older man, somewhere in his mid-70s, always wearing old jeans and flannel work shirts. A baseball cap typically covered what was left of his grizzled gray hair, and he kept a bristly gray beard to match. He also had only one arm, the right sleeve of his shirt tucked neatly into the jeans pocket. The first night I met Mackie, he asked for a beer on tap. "Which one?" I asked. "Mix 'em up," he declared, grinning at me. "Name's Mackie. You're new, ain't ya?" "Yes, sir. Started last night." "Darlin', I ain't been a sir in a coon's age. Just call me Mackie. You like working here?" "So far. I haven't had any trouble, and everyone is really nice." "Yep. Good place. Good people. Gets a little rowdy every now and then, but Betsy runs a tight ship and Mute takes care of trouble." I'd only seen Mute sit at the end of the bar, drink coffee, and glower at people, but I wasn't going to argue. I went to set up a tab, as it seemed that Mackie was there to stay a while. Mute thumped the counter next to me, and I automatically went to refill his cup. I was confused when I found it already full. I'd tried to avoid looking directly at him so as to not make him mad, but he thumped the counter again. I raised my eyes to his hesitantly. He wasn't mad or fierce this time, but there was a firmness to his face. He pointed to the tab area near the register and shook his head. No tab," I stammered. Pay as he goes?" He shook his head again. I'm confused. Does he pay at all?" He shook his head yet again. Okay." Betsy appeared at my side, coming from the back storage rooms with several bottles in her arms. "Hey, darlin', no need to fret. We don't charge him here. Mackie's a Vietnam War vet. Lost his arm over there saving a whole platoon of soldiers when he got blown out of a tank. His tab was paid a long time ago." My eyes watered slightly. I may have been working for a rough MC bar, but Mackie was right. Good place, good people. "I'm surprised that heap passes inspection," the old man grumbled. I laughed and waited for him to catch up to me. It probably wouldn't. "So I haven't had it inspected in a while," I quipped back. "Fred's been with me a long time, but hopefully I can let him retire gracefully in a few months." He grunted as he reached me, rolling his eyes. I hugged him, and we walked in side by side. Mackie sat at his favorite spot, and I went behind the bar. He reached out his hand as if holding a mug, and gazed at it with a sad, confused look on his face. I laughed, filled a mug from a random tap, and placed it carefully in his cupped palm. His expression immediately changed to one of happy satisfaction, and he slurped at the frothy head. I laughed again and happened to glance over at Mute, who was sitting at his usual spot. His gaze was intense, and for a moment I felt fear buzz through me. Then he nodded both in greeting and approval. I was getting more and more relaxed around Mute. I could interpret most of his signals and the few expressions he used. I'd still never seen him laugh or even crack a smile, but it seemed he had subtle ways of making himself understood, or at least he did to me. Almost like a private dialogue I could hear in my head. I even assigned a voice to him, deep, masculine, one that would growl out words but underneath had the power to roar. Mute thumped the bar twice, and I heard it as 2 syllables. "Kofi." I refreshed his cup, and he nodded at me once, his dark eyes on mine and his mouth in its normal frown. "Thanks," I heard in my head. "Don't mention it," I replied, as if we were having a conversation. He looked a bit surprised at my response, but I decided to let it go. I had to get along with him and stop being scared of him. "I'm going to make a round of the floor, clear some empties, and do a drink check. Okay with you, Betsy?" "Sounds good, darlin'." Betsy was at the bar running one of the blenders. probably for the margarita concoction she was known for making. Bruiser was the other bartender biker on duty. I didn't know how he got his club name, but it had nothing to do with the cute little chihuahua that Reese Witherspoon toted around in that Legally Blonde movie. He was not much taller than me, but very round. He wore a blue work shirt under his cut that strained at the buttons to hold him in. His thinning hair was pulled back in a short ponytail that wasn't much more than a single curl. He was pulling beers as fast as he could, trying to keep up with the crowd. He grunted a, "Hey, cat," greeting with a quick, tobacco-stained grin, and then went back to work. It was a Friday night, early enough that the football game was still on, but late enough that most of the bar patrons were tanked. Stud's band was on the stage playing loud country rock. He was the bassist and lead singer. A row of club skanks were in front of them, screaming and dancing hard, trying their best to entice the band members. I knew two of them, Nikki and Donna, and they were the biggest of the skanks, ready to go to the back rooms of the bar or do whatever they had to do to get invited to the lair. I glanced at Stud as I skirted the dance floor to get to the tables on the back wall. Nikki was singing off-key at the top of her lungs, jumping up and down so hard on her heels I was expecting her to either fall over or her unrestrained breasts to pop out of her low-cut top. I rolled my eyes at him, and he grinned through the lyrics and winked at me. Of all the bikers, Stud was the one who remembered my name first and never failed to greet me when he came in the bar. I'd heard he lived up to his club name quite often. In the short time I'd been working at the bar, he had taken several different women, either to the back room or to the lair. I wasn't surprised that he had his pick on a nightly basis. He was romance book model hot. Light golden blonde hair and icy blue eyes made him appear like a Viking warrior. All he needed was the horned helmet to complete the look. He was tall with broad shoulders, and his muscles were strongly defined under his tight t-shirts and club cut, but he wasn't bulky. He was the polar opposite of what I'd imagined a biker was, in that he had a full-fledged college degree in law, and was the club's accountant and lawyer. He came from a rich background and still had a ton of money, but something about the MC lifestyle called to him. He fit in perfectly. Normally, someone like him wouldn't give someone like me the time of day, or even notice I was in the room, but he was friendly and made a point of talking to me whenever we were in the same place. Since he was never more than friendly, and had never invited me to the lair, I felt easy around him. While I was walking through the crowd, a fight broke out between two men. Something about the game on the TV, or a woman, maybe both. I don't know what it was, but it got bad pretty quick. One drunk threw a sloppy punch at the other, and then got tackled by his buddy. Soon a couple more men joined in the brawl, and before I could get out of the way, I was trapped between the back wall and the fighters. This was so not the best place to be. Fists and blood were flying. Tables were shoved out of the way. Glasses and bottles crashed to the floor, covering it with leftover beer and broken glass. I pressed myself against the wall, trying to become smaller, praying to become invisible. The other people around the brawling men cleared the dance floor quickly, and I could see Stud moving off stage with his bass, his gaze searching for me, as I cowered against the back wall. My eyes darted around, looking for a place to hide or a gap in the crowd to escape through, but I couldn't move without getting near the fighters. A bottle came flying through the air and smashed against the wall just above my head, covering me in beer and bits of glass. I gave a short scream and covered my head, crouching lower and trying to watch for more flying objects at the same time. Mute was up and making his way into the fight. His usually calm and expressionless face was twisted in fury, lips pulled back in a feral snarl, his eyes flashing fire. He pulled one of the fighters out by grabbing the back of his shirt and literally tossing him across the room with very little effort. His corded arms flexed as he grabbed the next one, throwing him around like a sack of potatoes. He paused long enough to glance at me and quirk his eyebrow up. "You okay?" I couldn't speak, and he probably couldn't hear me over the angry shouting. I gave him a thumbs up even though my knees were shaking. He jerked his head toward the bar. "Move that way and get to the bar." I hugged the wall as I eased my way around the twisting mass of men. The few seconds it took Mute to check on me bought him a fist in the face. He staggered back briefly before coming back, at his assailant with a hard roundhouse to his jaw. The man went down and stayed down, knocked out cold. Mute spent a few more minutes jerking the fighters apart and throwing them to the side, but most of them broke off quickly after seeing that single punch. A lot of the bar patrons had simply left when the fight started. The man on the floor woke up after his buddies poured a leftover beer on his head. They helped him to his feet and staggered out to the parking lot. Betsy came up behind me. "You okay, darlin'?" "Yeah, I'm good," I answered, still buzzing from the adrenaline. I smelled like old beer now. I went to shake my head as best as I could over the trash can to get out any little glass bits, but I was sure there was something still left in there. "Go see to Mute. His lip's all cut up. Joni and I will get this mess cleared up. After that, you can go home and check the rest of your head for glass. You still got some in there." I nodded, still in a bit of shock. "You gonna quit?" I blinked at the unexpected question. No?" She smiled. "That's my girl. Tougher than you look." I went over to where Mute was sitting back in his usual spot. Mackie was grinning and reliving the fight like a kid in a candy store. "God damn, that was some punch. Betcha knocked out a tooth or two. That sumbitch won't be back for a while." Mute fingered his bloody lip where the sumbitch had landed his fist and thumped the bar sharply. "Kofi!" I brought him a fresh cup. I couldn't quite look up, but felt I needed to say something to him. "Thank you," was all I could manage. He grabbed my wrist as I was turning away. I gasped and froze in surprise. His grip was warm and strong. He pulled me closer across the bar, his dark eyes deep and unreadable. He reached toward my face and pulled out 3 small pieces of glass that were still caught in my hair. I swallowed at the contact, feeling an unfamiliar warmth bloom in my gut. I couldn't look away, and for a small eternity, we just stared at each other. He broke it off when he reached for the steaming mug, draining half of it. "Top it off?" I asked, my voice a little breathy. I was sure he could hear my heart pounding. He nodded, and I refilled his mug. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Donna approach. I wasn't sure of her status in the MC. From what Betsy told me, she wasn't an old lady, but she had a place in the club. Donna wore the same uniform the other club skanks favored. Long, blonde hair that was way over-bleached to the point of having a light green tint, tons of crusty makeup, super short jean skirt with a torn hem, and a cut-off tank one size too small, showing off ridiculously large breasts. If she was wearing a bra, there wasn't much padding, as her hardened nipples showed through easily. She could barely walk in the red spiked fuck-me pumps she had on her feet, but she managed to sidle up to Mute. I wrapped some ice cubes in a towel and brought it over to Mute. Donna was rubbing herself against him and cooing. He sat there stoically, his face set in his normal frown. "That was so hot," she trilled. I gritted my teeth at her grating voice. For some reason, I didn't want her anywhere near Mute. "So strong!" She ran her hands over his arms and back and pressed her breasts into his arm. I was surprised at how badly I wanted to slap her away from him. This wasn't me at all. And worse, it wasn't like there was a reason for me to feel this way. I offered the towel-wrapped ice to Mute. "Your hand and lip are bleeding," I whispered. He looked up into my eyes, and I was drawn into his dark gaze. I couldn't read his expression, but I felt there was something there for me to see. My heart pounded. Donna's squeal broke the connection. "Oh, Mutie, you're hurt!" Mute didn't move. He was still looking at me deeply, not reacting at all to the ridiculous way Donna said his name. He wrapped the dripping towel around his swollen knuckles and brought it up to his lip. Mackie was still chuckling and reliving the brief fight. "Set me up with one more myself, darlin'. Yes, sir, that was one hell of a punch." Betsy was over in the corner where I'd been trapped, sweeping up the last of the glass and talking into the cell phone lodged between her shoulder and ear. Donna was cooing something into Mute's ear and still rubbing her hands all over him. Other Dragon members were back at the pool table, their game having been barely slowed by the fight. A few other die-hard patrons were scattered around, but for the most part the bar was empty. "Damn, that girl just doesn't give up." Betsy came up behind me, shaking her head as she put away the broom and dustpan. "She's been teasing Mute for weeks at the clubhouse trying to get in his bed. I've told her over and over again, he's not a man to play with." She saw the confused look on my face and sighed. "It's part of club life, darlin'. There are 2 kinds of women in the club, old ladies and club bunnies. I know that's being real blunt, but that's how it is. Them girls that hang around the club looking for a good time? Them's the bunnies. They hop from one man to another faster than shit from a goose. No one treats 'em bad or beats on 'em. My boys ain't that kind of men. They got the same choice everyone else does. Donna wants to be an old lady, but no one here will take her that way on account as she's been with so many of their brothers already. Betsy kept cleaning up during her monologue of information. I'd figured out that Betsy was a talker. She hated silence, and all you had to do was stay quiet for a bit, and she would fill the air with words. Being an old lady is like being married, only better. You know my man, Brick, is the club president. We've been together for near on 40 years now. We've been through lots of rough and lots of good. We got kids and grandkids now. He gave me a ring years ago, but we never sealed the deal. I don't need that paper and a preacher to know he's mine and I'm his. I know beyond a shadow of a doubt he loves me and would die to protect me. I stay out of the club business for the most part and do what he needs me to do to help him out. He gave me this bar to run for him and the club. I know he's had a few other tastes over the years, but I'm still the one he comes home to every night and will be until we leave this earth. She dumped the broken glass into the nearest trash can, set out just for bottles. Mute is a challenge to them bunnies. He doesn't party much, doesn't drink or take a woman very often. They all want of a piece of him like he's a big prize. Something about the strong, silent type, I reckon. I've seen 2 or 3 of them up at the lair, crawling all over him, showing him their tits and such. He don't pay no attention to none of it most of the time, but once in a while he'll take one back to his room. Never seen him take one a second time. Betsy made her trademark psht sound. Donna needs to wake up. Mute ain't never gonna be interested in her for more than a night, if he ever does in the first place. Okay, I stuttered, glancing over at Donna still pressed to Mute, running her fingers through his hair. He sat stoically, just sipping his coffee, the melting ice dripping on the counter from his wrapped hand. He seemed to be completely ignoring her, but he wasn't exactly pushing her away. You all right? You ain't thinking about quittin' now, are you? Betsy is really hung up on this quitting thing. No, I'm not gonna quit. I just keep thinking about this one thing. What's that, darlin'? Time to break the tension a bit. I grinned at her. Mutie? Seriously? I choked out, trying to stifle my laugh. Betsy threw her head back and laughed, both in humor and relief. Mute glared at both of us. I've been so afraid you'll get overwhelmed and leave. I should have known better. Not everyone is cut out for this life. Even working around it can be a challenge. I'm done for the evening too, ladies. See you tomorrow night, Mackie declared, as if nothing had happened. Betsy shooed him off with a smile. Stud appeared at the bar, his blue eyes full of worry. You okay, Cat? I tried to get to you, but I couldn't see where you'd gone. I felt my face flush at his concern. I'm okay. Nothing a hairbrush and shower won't take care of. I need to pack up. Are you okay to drive? I'll take you home when I'm done, unless you want to go to the lair. It's probably closer, and we've got showers and stuff up there. My mouth dropped open at the coveted invitation to visit the famed private compound that so many people tried to get into. He looked into my eyes, waiting for a response, and I could feel the others looking at me. I'd heard many times about Stud and his almost nightly array of partners. I'd even seen him charm the pants off a woman, literally. Usually an invite to the lair with Stud meant an invite to his bed, but he didn't seem to be giving me the same act he did when he was out for a good time. I decided he was just being a concerned friend more than anything else. I was kind of relieved, as it would be too much pressure to try to live up to Stud's image. Any of the women who were hanging around him earlier would jump at the chance to go to the lair, especially with him. I was sitting there with a golden opportunity I was too scared to take. Mute's mug came crashing down on the bar hard enough. That coffee dregs sloshed over the side. The noise broke my trance, and I looked over at him. Mute finally had had enough of Donna hanging on him and had left his bar spot, walking out the door, leaving her standing in confusion. Betsy just rolled her eyes. Take my advice, girl. Find someone else. Mute ain't interested, and I doubt any of the other boys will make an old lady out of a woman who has been public property so long. Donna pouted. He's probably just tired from the fight. He'll take me to the lair sometime soon. What about you, Kat? Stud was still waiting. You want to come to the lair and clean up or go home? I flushed again and felt a little panic. I decided it was best to retreat and become invisible again. Thanks for the invite up there, but I'd best go on home. I have stuff to do in the morning and a study group tomorrow afternoon. I'll be okay getting there on my own. His eyebrows came together. I got the feeling that not many women turned him down. Maybe I was wrong. I'll at least follow you home. I shook my head and laughed, trying again to break the sudden tension. Don't bother. I'm cleaning up and going straight to bed. You need to get up to the lair anyway, don't you? Your band is going to play up there for a bit, right? Yeah, we are. Tell you what, hand me your phone, he demanded. I gave him my ancient slider with its tiny screen. He gave me a look and rolled his eyes at the old phone as he programmed his number into it. A moment later, his fancy smartphone started singing an old Def Leppard song. Pour Some Sugar on Me was now my ringtone in Stud's phone. You have my number now. When you get in safely, you text me. If I don't hear from you in the next half hour, I'm coming down the hill. Got me? I bit my lower lip just to have something to do. No one had looked out for me in a long time, and being cared for left a warm feeling in my belly. That scared me. I didn't want to get used to it. When it happened, it was only a matter of time before it was ripped out from under me. I plastered a smile on my face that I hoped looked relaxed and genuine. I got you. Thanks, Stud. This means a lot to me. He still wasn't happy, but he let me walk out the door to my car by myself. I went to where my car was parked. I could hear the burble of the river just beyond the fenced area of the lot. It startled me to see Mute sitting on his massive black bike, parked just on the other side of my car. The yellow glow of the outside safety light lit up his face, making him look predatory. A very handsome predator. That warmth in my belly clenched both in fear and fascination. He raised a cigarette to his lips and took a short drag. He looked behind me and then back at me with his eyebrow raised in question. You going to the lair with Stud? I shook my head and opened my car door. No, I'm not going to the lair tonight. I have too much to do tomorrow, and I'd rather go home. He was still for a moment. Then he nodded and dropped the half-smoked cigarette and crushed it out with his booted foot. Good, I heard in my head. I bit at my bottom lip again and dropped my eyes. He snapped his fingers to get my attention and then held his finger and thumb up to his mouth and ear as if using a phone. He reached his other hand with large palm open, out to me. Gimme your phone. For the second time that night, a hot biker programmed his number into my phone while frowning at its age. A moment later, his phone beeped with a text to put my number in his phone. No fancy ringtone for me there. Text me when you get home. His gestures and look echoed Stud almost perfectly. I will, I said, taking back my phone. Stud wants me to text him too, I'll be fine. His expression said nothing else. I know he was just doing his job, but still he had come to my rescue and had gotten hurt because of it. I felt I had to say something. Thank you again, Mute, for helping me tonight. You have no idea how much that means to me. His eyes glittered as they bored into mine. That belly clench bloomed with sudden heat. I left, not trusting myself to say anything more. The night had been overwhelming, between the fight in the bar and the attention I received from not one but two of the hottest club members. I needed to get invisible, and fast. Mute sat on his bike and watched the taillights of Kat's rust bucket Taurus disappear. He'd overheard her refer to her car as Fred once or twice. Fuck. She actually named that fire trap. Wouldn't be long before Fred needed to be renamed Dead Fred by the sound of the engine. He spat on the ground, trying to get the bitter cigarette taste out of his mouth. He didn't smoke often, mostly because Betsy didn't want it in the bar, but also because he didn't want anything to control him. Once in a while, though, after a really bad night, the craving got to him. Craving. Fuck. Mute clenched his fists over and over, feeling the bruised skin tighten over his knuckles. The panic he'd felt when he'd seen Kat against the wall, terrified and covered in glass, still sat in his gut. The need to protect her was heavy, and he didn't know where it was coming from. Just my job. I would have done the same for Betsy or any of the other girls. But if it had been Betsy, she would have come out swinging herself and probably kicked some ass before he even got off his bar stool. He fingered the scabbing split in his lip, unsure that he would have shown so much concern for any of the other girls, getting distracted enough to be sucker punched. Fuck this, he thought furiously. Kat was too damn soft, not made for the life. She just needed to get the hell gone. He cranked up his bike. Its sleek power rumbled under him. He saw Stud come out of the bar, his arm around a random band groupie who had been dancing with several others around the front of the stage all night. He lifted her chin with his hand and kissed her hard. Looked like some serious tongue action was going on. Stud climbed on his bike and the groupie climbed on behind him. He grinned at her over his shoulder and took off toward the entrance to the lair. Mute watched him go. Like smoking, getting laid by random women wasn't something he did often. Most women at the bar took one look at his hard face and backed off. The regular pussy at the club was always available. Donna would fuck him in a heartbeat, but he knew she had thoughts of being his old lady, and that was something that wasn't going to happen. He sat on the purring bike, the craving for another cigarette growing. Fuck. Maybe I do just need to get laid, he thought, looking at the security gate that led to the lair. Donna was still around, and had made it clear she was available. Mute grimaced. Not tonight. Don't need that shit. Too much headache to deal with later. He spat on the ground again, turned his bike, and drove away from the bar in a spray of gravel, heading home. The bar was packed the next night. Stud's band was playing somewhere else, and a bigger touring band was playing here. It felt like everyone in Bryson City had come out to see them. Either that, or word had gotten around about the fight, and people wanted a front row seat if the show was going to be repeated. The area reserved for dancing was packed with gyrating bodies, mostly female. Their squeals filled the air, almost overtaking the band. It was busy enough even in the fall months that Betsy had hired another waitress. I was serving on the floor and running around like crazy trying to keep up with drink orders and bussing tables. Bruiser was back at the bar pouring and mixing alongside Betsy. Mute was at his usual spot, drinking his coffee and glowering at anyone who got too close to him. A few of the other dragons were there as well, drinking, enjoying the music, and flirting with anyone in a short skirt. I was clearing a table full of glasses and empty bottles when, for some reason, I looked up and saw Mute staring at me. No, not staring, glaring in deep anger. My heart dropped to the pit of my stomach as my brain started running through all the ways I could have pissed him off. Shit. Did I remember to text him last night along with Stud? Then I heard a sardonic voice right behind me. Got some new talent? In the pool, I see. I jumped a little and turned to see two club members I had not met yet. The one who had spoken had the name Joker sewn on his cut, and the other had Box. Just a hint, baby. You'll get better tips if you work your stuff in shorts and heels. That ass is fine in them jeans, but the sneakers gotta go. What's your name? I'm, Katrina, I stuttered. Joker was like Stud, in that he had blonde hair and blue eyes, but that's where the similarities ended. His hair was cut in a mohawk, and the sides of his shaved head were tattooed with a row of dancing harlequin skulls. He had a ring piercing in his eyebrow and lip. Well, Katrina, how's about getting me and my friend here a beer? Something on tap, and give it a good head. He drew out the word head and reached between his legs to grab himself. I swallowed, not trusting myself to speak. I just turned and walked quickly to the bar to get their beers. Bruiser was frowning as he filled the heavy glass mugs. Joker's harmless, sweetheart, but there's bad blood between him and Mute. Brother or not, he ain't happy that bastard's here. Watch yourself, he intoned as he finished pulling the beer and loaded my tray. I brought the tall foaming glasses to them at the table they had taken over and set them down on paper coasters in front of them. Cat, 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 Joker chanted. Itty bitty, pretty kitty cat. I moved to leave, but he grabbed my arm, pulling me onto his lap. I squeaked as I lost my balance, trying not to drop the serving tray or fall on the floor. What's your hurry, pussycat? Not much of a cat, are you? More like a mouse. Quiet little mousie. His sing-song tone was more menacing than playful. My heart was racing with the need to escape. Please let me up. I have work to do. He gave me a fake crestfallen look and whined, Oh, but we're having such a good time, right, Box? I just want to play with the pussycat for a minute. It's been a while since I petted one. He held me down on his lap, and I could feel him getting hard underneath my bottom. He started grinding against me and shoved his nose in my neck, sniffing deeply. Yeah, fresh new talent. You go into the lair after work tonight, baby? I can pet that pussy all night. Make it purr. He rolled the R in purr. I felt the panic rise in my throat. Part of being invisible meant I didn't have to deal with harassment very often, and usually it came in the form of catcalls and a few whistled suggestions. I'd never really been scared of it as I was now. The feeling of being physically restrained and forced to feel Joker's growing erection was terrifying. I struggled a bit on Joker's lap and tried to sound firm. No, I'm not going to the lair. I have work to do. So please let me up. I sounded more like I was begging. Joker laughed and held on tighter, running one arm around my hips to hold me down and the other over my bottom. Oh, pussycat, the things I'm gonna do to this ass. A hand came down on the table with a bang loud enough to make me think it split the wood. I ceased my struggles and looked up into the absolutely furious eyes of Mute. I knew then what it felt like to be that mouse caught between two predatory cats. Joker laughed again. Well, hello to you too, Mute. Long time no see. He relaxed his hold on me and I tried to stand, only to have him tighten his arms around me again. I swear Mute all but growled. What's the matter, Mute? Cat got your tongue? How does she taste? He went into peals of laughter at his own crude joke and threw his arms wide open. I leapt up and out of the way. Mute reached for my arm and pulled me behind him. Betsy came up behind me. You okay, darlin'? Yeah, I'm good, I answered, still buzzing from the adrenaline. I smelled like old beer now. I went to shake my head as best as I could over the trash can to get out any little glass bits, but I was sure there was something still left in there. Go see to Mute. His lips all cut up. Joni and I will get this mess cleared up. After that, you can go home and check the rest of your head for glass. You still got some in there. I nodded, still in a bit of shock. You gonna quit? I blinked at the unexpected question. No? She smiled. That's my girl. Tougher than you look. I went over to where Mute was sitting back in his usual spot. Mackie was grinning and reliving the fight like a kid in a candy store. God damn, that was some punch. Betcha knocked out a tooth or two. That sumbitch won't be back for a while. Mute fingered his bloody lip where the sumbitch had landed his fist and thumped the bar sharply. Kofi! I brought him a fresh cup. I couldn't quite look up, but felt I needed to say something to him. Thank you, was all I could manage. He grabbed my wrist as I was turning away. I gasped and froze in surprise. His grip was warm and strong. He pulled me closer across the bar, his dark eyes deep and unreadable. He reached toward my face and pulled out 3 small pieces of glass that were still caught in my hair. I swallowed at the contact, feeling an unfamiliar warmth bloom in my gut. I couldn't look away, and for a small eternity, we just stared at each other. He broke it off when he reached for the steaming mug, draining half of it. Top it off? I asked, my voice a little breathy. I was sure he could hear my heart pounding. He nodded, and I refilled his mug. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Donna approach. I wasn't sure of her status in the MC. From what Betsy told me, she wasn't an old lady, but she had a place in the club. Donna wore the same uniform the other club skanks favored. Long, blonde hair that was way over-bleached to the point of having a light green tint, tons of crusty makeup, super short jean skirt with a torn hem, and a cut-off tank one size too small, showing off ridiculously large breasts. If she was wearing a bra, there wasn't much padding, as her hardened nipples showed through easily. She could barely walk in the red-spiked fuck-me pumps she had on her feet, but she managed to sidle up to Mute. I wrapped some ice cubes in a towel and brought it over to Mute. Donna was rubbing herself against him and cooing. He sat there stoically, his face set in his normal frown. That was so hot, she trilled. I gritted my teeth at her grating voice. For some reason, I didn't want her anywhere near Mute. So strong! She ran her hands over his arms and back and pressed her breasts into his arm. Joker, you quit messing with my help. Kat's a good girl. You chase her off, I'm gonna put your ass in an apron and have you start sweeping up and serving. Go up to the lair and find a woman there, you horny bastard. Betsy, my one true love, Joker hollered back. When are you gonna dump that useless old man of yours and run away with me? He stood up, one arm flung out to the side and the other placed across his chest, palm flat over his heart. He showed a leg and executed a courtly bow. Just like that, the tension was broken. Joker became his namesake, loud, cracking jokes on everything and anyone, the life of the party. His friend Box sat as his wingman for the rest of the night, and both Donna and Nikki glued themselves to them. Donna sat firmly on Joker's lap, while Nikki rubbed against Box. Their squeals grated against my ears every time they called for another round. No hard feelings, right, pussycat? I was just joking with you, Joker said to me while he was squeezing Donna's ample ass. I placed the latest round on the table and picked up the empties. Sure, no problem, I muttered, and tried to smile at him. My belly was still quivering with fight or flight instinct, leaning more toward flight. He grabbed my wrist. His eyes hit mine. His voice was light, but his eyes were serious. You really with Mute? Donna huffed in protest. She ain't with anyone. Baby. She's just here to help Betsy until she gets out of nursing school, she slurred. She was completely drunk, stroking the shaved part of his head and licking his neck. Is that right? Well then, pussycat. Anytime you feel like playing doctor, you can call me. He let me go. Donna huffed again at his words, and then burst into drunken giggles when he stood up and hefted her over his shoulder. See y'all later, he yelled out to the bar. I gotta go give a full examination to this woman. Box, where's my anal probe? He and Box left, I guessed to go to the lair. I was able to breathe easier without him in the building. Betsy was wiping the bar when I finally got a chance to sit for a minute. The other old ladies were there too. Don't pay no mind to Joker, darlin'. He's a club member but currently a nomad, and wanders in from time to time. He ain't never here too long, so we don't have to deal with him much. He just likes to party and make trouble, but he's all mouth. Let me know if he gets to be too much. Molly chimed in with more concern. I don't know, Betsy. He may not be as harmless as you think. He's always been shifty. His daddy was one of the defectors way back when. Then there was the thing with Mute. Betsy stopped wiping the bar and looked Molly in the eye. Her direct gaze was not one I'd ever want on me. That was a long time ago, and that hatchet was buried. We've moved on. Mute's moved on. The club moved on. You need to let it rest. Molly pursed her lips but didn't say anything. She followed my habits, dropped her eyes, and became invisible, or as invisible as a biker's old lady could get. 2 thumps on the counter distracted me. Mute added a third one. Kofi now. I hurried to fill his cup. His face was dark and brooding, still angry at Joker. Clearly he was not as forgiving of Joker's antics as Betsy was. His hand clutched at the white mug so hard I thought it might break. I could still see some bruising there, and around his lip where the brawler had sucker punched him. He'd rescued me 2 times now, from last night's fight and from being accosted by Joker. I didn't know where this was going, but I liked it. I liked feeling that someone had my back, at least here at the bar. All my life, it was just me. My last set of foster parents weren't bad people, but I was never really part of their family. I was always the extra, identified as my foster kid, rather than my daughter. More and more each day, I was getting the sense of belonging somewhere, of having people who cared enough to help and defend me, of having a family. Mute managed to shatter that feeling in a matter of minutes. Thanks again, Mute, I said quietly. Anything else I can get for you? Mute looked in my eyes and scowled furiously. He was mad at me, not what I expected. He pulled out his phone and rapidly texted something. My phone beeped, and I slid open the top to see what he'd sent. Mute. Quit making trouble. Stay away from Joker and Stud. I'm getting tired of saving your ass for a stupid shit. He slammed his phone down and picked up his white coffee mug, sucking back more of the black brew. I could feel my throat closing up. I didn't trust myself to speak. I didn't start the fight last night. I just got caught in it. I didn't flirt or seek out Stud. He came to me. I didn't throw myself in Joker's lap. He pulled me there and wouldn't let me go. How was any of this my fault? Mute sat there at the end of the bar in his usual place, drinking his coffee, judging me as unworthy. For some reason, the unfairness was more than I could handle, and I felt anger rush through me. Normally, I would have nodded or murmured something and turned away. Instead, I slid my phone closed and slipped it into my back pocket. I looked back at him as he rested both tattooed arms on the bar, the mug held between his hands. Thanks again for your help, but you're an asshole. He blinked in surprise. I guess he didn't expect the mouse to fight back. I finished out the night, ignoring him as best I could, only filling his mug when he thumped the bar and not speaking or making eye contact. I drove home in my protesting car and went straight to bed. I could hear Sheila and Chip in the next room, their sounds loud enough to cover up any noise my tears made. Fuck, fuck, fuck. Mute stepped outside the bar, ripping open his cigarette pack and nearly dumping the little white sticks on the ground in his fury. He clamped one between his lips, lit it, and sucked deep. Fucking Joker. As a part of the club. Joker was a brother, and Mute took the code seriously, but he still loathed the man, his jokes, his presence, and everything else about him. It was a real struggle to have to take the back of someone he hated. Betsy liked him and his antics well enough to want to keep the peace, but Mute would rather he go away. Far, far away. God damn. Shit. He threw the barely touched cigarette down, stomping on it angrily. He could have tolerated the man's loud presence in the bar, as he only ever stayed for a few days in one place. But when he put his hands on Kat, Mute saw red. Her fear had been palpable, and his only thought was getting her off that fucker's lap. He was probably balls deep in Donna by now, up at the lair. But Kat? Hell no. Asshole needed to bleed for touching her. Mackie strolled out of the bar. I'm surprised Brick puts up with that sumbitch, he declared. His one arm twitched uncontrollably. For a moment, and he peered up at Mute. You all right, boy? That rat bastard will be gone again come tomorrow. He just likes to stir up trouble. Kat didn't get hurt, and she's stronger than you think. She can handle him. Fucking Kat. Mute looked down at the shredded cigarette. He was feeling guilty about his texted words to her. The fight in the bar wasn't her fault. She was just there at the wrong place and time. He also knew she didn't start anything with Joker. Hell, she went out of her way to not attract attention. Dressing plainly, not a lot of makeup and sneakers for Christ's sake. Problem was, she still had his attention. Every shift she worked, he watched her. He saw her smile, her kindness to Mackie, her laughter with Betsy, and the care she showed for the people around her. He wished she would shine some of that goodness his way, but whenever she found him looking at her, she would shudder that glow, drop her eyes, and avoid him as much as she could. He knew he did it to himself, pushing her away with his rough words and manners. He shouldn't have lashed out at her earlier, but it was for the best. Maybe she'd get the hint and move on. Mackie was wrong. She was too sweet and fragile for this life and needed protection, even from him, especially from him. Mute nodded an I'm fine to Mackie and flicked a hand towards his bike. The old man chortled. It was a treat for him to ride on the back of it. With one arm, it was awkward to hold on, but Mute figured the war vet deserved whatever happiness he could get. He put his thoughts about Kat down for the night and guided the bike slow and steady as he took Mackie home.